The traditional baseline assumption in cognitive psychology is that the human mind operates as a general-purpose, content-free information processor. This means the mechanisms we use to evaluate a logical puzzle are assumed to be the exact same mechanisms we use to select food or choose a mate. This view relies heavily on functional agnosticism. Researchers study how the mind categorizes, reasons, and retrieves memories without asking what specific adaptive problems those cognitive mechanisms actually evolved to solve. But this creates an evolutionary paradox. If the human mind is truly a general processor, riddled with crude shortcuts and illogical biases, how did our ancestors successfully navigate the complex, high-stakes problem-solving required to survive the Pleistocene epoch? In ancestral environments, failing to make highly accurate adaptive decisions, like distinguishing a venomous threat from a harmless shadow, frequently resulted in death. Historically, mainstream cognitive psychologists have tested human intelligence in laboratories using artificial, context-free stimuli, like nonsense syllables or arbitrary geometric shapes, completely removed from those life or death contexts. Evolutionary psychology presents a different premise. The mind is not a single general-purpose computer. It consists of a large number of highly specific, functionally specialized mechanisms. A general-purpose processor would face the problem of combinatorial explosion. Without built-in constraints tailored to specific tasks, the number of possible behaviors approaches infinity, leaving an organism with no way to identify a successful adaptive solution amidst a blizzard of lethal errors. Evaluating human intelligence through the lens of content-independent formal logic ignores the highly specific environmental pressures that actually shaped our cognitive architecture. To see how humans supposedly fail at reasoning, consider the classic Linda problem. In this experiment, subjects read a description of a woman named Linda. She wears tie-dyed shirts, organizes women in her workplace, and wears men are slime buttons. Subjects are asked, is it more likely Linda is a bank teller or a feminist bank teller? Because the description is so highly salient, the vast majority conclude it is more likely she is a feminist bank teller. This chart illustrates the mathematical logic subjects allegedly violate. As seen, feminist bank tellers are a strict, smaller subset within the larger category of all bank tellers. Therefore, conjunctive events, like being a feminist bank teller, can never exceed the likelihood of their individual elements. Evolutionary psychologists Lida Cosmids and John Tooby argue this result demonstrates ecological rationality, a cognitive architecture designed to prioritize the statistical regularities of a natural environment over the abstract rules of formal logic. Ecological rationality utilizes specific design features that coordinate with the recurring structure of the world. We fear snakes and not cars because our ancestors encountered a statistical regularity between snakes and lethal consequences for millions of years. When researchers present experimental stimuli that mismatch the problems our minds were designed to solve, cognitive errors are the inevitable result. This mismatch is even more pronounced in higher stakes assessments, like the classic medical diagnosis problem. In a famous study conducted at Harvard Medical School, researchers tested highly trained medical experts to see how they process diagnostic data. The experts were given two parameters. A specific disease has a prevalence of 1 in 1,000 people, and the test to detect it has a 5% false positive rate. The researchers then asked a critical question. Assuming you know nothing else about a patient's symptoms, what is the chance that a person who tests positive actually has the disease? 45% of these medical experts guessed the probability was 95%. Only 18% correctly answered 2%. This result is often cited as a base rate fallacy, where humans ignore overall statistical proportions when presented with compelling individualized test data. But Cosmides and Tooby proposed a different mechanism at work, the frequentist hypothesis, rooted in how early humans tracked data in the physical world. The frequentist hypothesis suggests that human reasoning mechanisms evolved to take in and produce frequency data based on local sampling, meaning they count exact numbers of events over time. In the Pleistocene environment, reliable numerical statements about single event probabilities did not exist. People tracked the frequency of recurrent events, like finding berries 3 times out of 8 trips to a valley. Asking the human brain to compute single-event probabilities is like asking our visual system to perceive true color under artificial sodium vapor lighting. It forces the mechanism to operate outside of its functional design. To test the frequentist hypothesis, Kosmits and Tooby took the exact same Harvard medical diagnosis problem and reframed it. Instead of using single-event probabilities, they translated the data into frequencies. A 5% false positive rate became 50 out of every 1,000 perfectly healthy people test positive. The underlying mathematical reality of the medical scenario remained identical, only the format of the information changed. This graph shows the experiment's results. In the original non-frequentist format, only 12% of subjects answered correctly, but using verbal frequentist data, the success rate surged to 76%. The data from this experiment shows that people do not actually ignore base rate information, so long as that information maps onto the ancestral inputs they are equipped to process. The human mind is adaptively rational, highly capable of making precise judgments when processing the specific formats of information it evolved to handle. Moving beyond the blank slate view of the mind changes how we view the fragmented subdisciplines of psychology. In clinical psychology, mental disorder can be defined strictly as an evolved mechanism failing to perform its historically designed function, such as a blood clotting mechanism that fails after a cut. In many cases, an evolved mechanism functions exactly as it was designed to, but produces a distressing outcome because the modern environment lacks the ancestral conditions the mechanism was built to navigate. For instance, paranoia may be a functioning adaptation for detecting concealed social threats. At the high end of the spectrum, some individuals simply have lower thresholds for threat detection, allowing them to cope with hostile intentions that are often intentionally hidden. This same logic applies to personality psychology, where heritable individual differences are often dismissed as genetic junk. These traits are maintained by frequency-dependent selection, allowing variants, like many cooperators and a few cheaters, to coexist in equilibrium. As the exploitative strategy grows, its payoff decreases because cooperative hosts develop better detection mechanisms, preventing cheaters from overtaking the group. This means traits like psychopathy or extroversion aren't random accidents. They represent alternative, adaptively patterned strategies maintained by specific evolutionary pressures. From the frequency-dependent strategies of our personalities to the ecological rationality of our reasoning, these diverse behaviors all resolve into a single, functional map of the human species. When the subdisciplines are anchored in these evolved mechanisms, they stop looking like arbitrary divisions and start functioning as a unified science of the mind.